Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Madiha Sahir from Department of Zoology, Bank Road campus of University of Education, Lahore. So, students, as all of you know very well that on this platform we are discussing different topics of our course outline, evolution and principles of systematics. Right. So, as you know that we are moving ahead towards the completion of our course and discussing different topics. So, the topic today we're going to talk about is the coevolution. Coevolution, we're going to talk about the different aspects of coevolution, and different kinds of coevolution would be our main concern in today's lecture, right? If we talk about the coevolution, then you can see that it is comprised of two words, right? Co and evolution. Co is what? Co represents togetherness. It represents that something that is happening on joint basis or jointly or simultaneously, right? And evolution is what? Evolution is the change. It is a gradual change in the characteristics of organisms that run generations after generations. So coevolution is one of the mechanisms of evolution that is taking place on joint basis between the species. Right. So let's talk about the different aspects of coevolution. Okay, first of all, let's have a proper definition of the term coevolution. Coevolution is the joint evolution of two or more species as a consequence of the ecological interaction. As you know very well, what is ecology? Ecological interactions, that is the interaction of the species with other species as well as with the environment where they are residing or where they are living. This term was first coined by the Charles Mott in his article of evolution in 1958. He first coined this term. He used this term in his article of evolution. So coevolution is what? When the two species or two or more species are in close relationship with living in close relationship with each other, then definitely the change in the one species will provoke the change in the other species. So in other words, you may also say like I have written here, that in coevolution, adaptive changes in one species follow the adaptive changes in another. If one species got adaptations due to the change in the environment or due to some ecological behavior, then this change in particular trait of one species will provoke the response change in the associated species, right? So this is what the change response mechanism, and that's why it is known as the coevolution, because change in one species will provoke the change in the associated species that is in close relationship to the first one. So definitely both species are adapting themselves according to the change into the each other's trait. So this will be more elaborated in the coming slides with examples and with different types. Okay, coevolution is that one species evolves in response to the other and the other species evolves in response to the first one. This what we have talked in our previous slide as well. This is the response change response. Change is what? Evolution, or so this is what? Change response mechanism. Now let's come towards the different types of the coevolution. The type of the coevolution depends on the type of the interaction that is, or type of the relationship that the two species are having in between. So type of the relationship will predict that what kind of coevolution we gonna talk about. If we talk about the types, then majorly coevolution is of three types. Number one, here you can see that this one is the parasite host coevolution. So two species are having the relationship of parasite and host. One is parasite, another is the host. So this kind of evolution that is taking place between these two species in response to each other adaptations is known as the parasite host coevolution. Second kind is the predator prey coevolution. Here the organism is having the relationship of predator and the prey. So the coevolution that is taking place because of the changes in both towards each other's change, as a response towards each other's change, is known as the predator-prey coevolution. The third major kind of the coevolution is the mutualistic coevolution or the beneficial coevolution. This kind of coevolution takes place in those species that have the mutualistic or beneficial relationship to each other. They are giving benefits to each other, right? So these are the major three kinds of the coevolution, and we will discuss one by one these kinds with the help of the different examples. Okay, first type of coevolution is the parasite host coevolution, as I told you in the previous slide as well. So the first type we are going to talk about this type in this slide: parasitism and or viral pathogens host coevolution. Right, parasites are what you know very well. The parasites are the organisms that get their nourishment from the other organisms. So these organisms or these parasites could be plant or they could be animal that are taking their nourishment from the other organisms, and from the organism from where they are taking their nourishment is called the host organism. Parasites, you know that they could be ectoparasites, they could be endoparasites, they could be microscopic parasites like bacteria, viruses, they could be macroscopic parasites. Right, so if they are endoparasites, then they could reside within the body of the host, or if they are ectoparasites, then they could reside on the body surface of the host. So there is a wide range of parasites. Now parasites depend on their vigilance, on their pathogenesis. They could be very mild to their host, right, and sometimes they could cause very severe infections, or such parasites are known as the pathogens. So the parasites that could cause the severe infections or severe diseases in the host, that are called the pathogens, and that could be mild to the host, that are the simple parasites. Now as we are talking about the coevolution, now because these two organisms have the host parasite relationship between them, or these two species have this relationship between, that's why the evolution type of evolution that is taking place on joint basis between these two species is known as the host parasite coevolution or pathogen host coevolution. Right, both are the same things. Now let's read it. Notable examples of coevolution have been documented between parasites or pathogens and their hosts. Parasites are parasites that could be pathogenic, that could be mild to the host. First example is the flex plant and the fungal rust parasite. Now there is a plant that is known as a flex. There are many fungal pathogens that cause the rust on the plants. So here we're going to talk about the relationship or evolution that is taking place between the flex plant and the fungal rust pathogen. Now what happened previously, the flex plant, here in this picture you can see this is the rusted flex plant. Flex plant we're going to talk about is the Linum usitatissimum, right? So this plant previously it did not have any resistant genes against this pathogen, but once the pathogen attacks it and got rusted it, what happened in response to this selection pressures confer many pathogenic resistant genes in the flex plant. Now the flex plant then develops about 27 different resistant genes against this fungal rust pathogen. Now when the flex plant got these genes or evolved these genes in its genotype, then in response to these resistant genes, what happened, the fungal pathogen also got the 27 new genes that could overcome or that could break the resistance of the host genes. Right, so what happened previously, there were no resistant genes. Then after the attack of the parasite or pathogen, the fungal flex plant evolves and got 27 resistant genes that could resist the fungus of the that could resist the rust of the fungal pathogen, right? But what happened with the time, and as a response of these resistant genes, the the pathogen got the 27 new genes in its genetic material that overcome the resistance of the host genes. Now let's read it. Flex plant and fungal rust pathogen. There is a wide range of such fungal pathogens that cause rust on different plants. 27 genes in the flex plant, Linum usitatissimum, confer resistance against the fungal rust pathogen, right? The pathogen in turn has similar number of genes, allowing it to overcome the resistance of these host genes confer, right? The host gene got the 27 genes, and in response to that resistant 27 genes, the pathogen also evolves and got the 27 more genes in its genetic material to break the resistance of the host genes. So in such cases, increased frequency of the resistant mutations in the host is followed by the selection for increased frequency of one or more mutant genes in the parasite or pathogen to overcome that resistance. So this is the coevolution of the flex plant and fungal rust plant, that is due to the adaptations towards the resistance and then the pathogen adaptations towards to break that resistance, right? Here you could see the plant. See, this is the one leaf of the flex plant that got rust because of the pathogen, fungal rust pathogen, right? Okay, here is the second example of host parasite coevolution, and it's about the Myxoma virus and Australian rabbits. Myxoma was the pathogenic virus that caused a very severe disease, myxomatosis, in the rabbits, different population of the rabbits. Now there is a short story behind this example, and what's that? The rabbit population was growing too much in the certain regions of Australia, and these rabbits were they deteriorated the fields and plants, and even they dug up the land, and they caused much erosion of the land. So it was very difficult to control their population. So the authorities decided to eradicate the population of the rabbits. And what could be the method? So they introduced the Myxoma virus in the rabbit population. So you can say that Myxoma virus was used as the biocontrol agent against the Australian rabbits, and it was a virus that they actually introduced this virus just to eradicate this vertebrate pest. It was behaving like a pest, and as you know, it is vertebrate animal, so the word has been used, vertebrate pest. But this kind of biocontrol agent would prove unsuccessful later because of the coevolution, or because of evolution, or because of the natural selection in the rabbit population, and also in the strains of the different strain of the virus, Myxoma virus. Now let's read it. A single strain of Myxoma virus was released as a biocontrol agent against Australian rabbit population in 1950, right? Myxoma virus was the first virus ever introduced into the wild with the purpose of eradicating a vertebrate pest. As I told you that rabbit population got so overwhelmed that they degrade the fields and they erode the land too much there. So, namely the feral European rabbit in Australia in 1950. The well-documented long-term failure of this strategy was consequence of the natural selective pressure on both the rabbit and the virus population. Now, after the infection, first about 90% of the 99% of the rabbit population got eradicated or died of the myxomatosis. Myxomatosis is a disease that that's been caused by the Myxoma virus, and it has the symptoms very similar to the conjunctivitis. You know, the conjunctivitis is a kind of the eye disease we used to have sometimes. Symptoms were quite similar to those. In these symptoms, the rabbit eyes here you can see that got swollen and moist, and nose also, and some genitalia portion as well. So what happened, that with first in the first case, about 99.8% rabbit population got eradicated, but when they second time introduced the same virus, rabbit population that couldn't eradicate it to that much percentage. Why? Because of the natural selection, because of the selection pressures, rabbit got the resistance against those viruses, Myxoma viruses. And the experience is regarded as a classical example of the host pathogen coevolution following cross-species transmission of the pathogen. Cross-species transmission of the pathogen, actually in this disease, the mosquitoes are the intermediate vectors or carriers of the Myxoma viruses, right? They carry the Myxoma viruses to the rabbits. Okay, now both the viruses and the host, that are the rabbits, undergone changes in their traits, or in other words, you may say that coevolution took place in these two species in response to each other. So what happened after being exposed to different selection pressures? Viruses become attenuated and the host become resistant. Attenuation is, you may say that viruses become wild, or their capacity to cause the severity in the disease becomes very, very low. They becomes very mild. And on the other hand, what changes did occur in the rabbits or in the host? They become immune to the myxomatosis, or they become immune, or they become resistant to the Myxoma viruses. Now let's read it. There is selective pressure on the virus to attenuate its virulence. Virulence is what? Pathogenicity. So while after exposing to the selection, natural selection and selective pressures, viruses become mild, and on the host to become resistant to the viruses. So less virulent virus strains were being selected, and rabbits that were more resistant to myxomatosis were also being selected. What happened right after the exposure to the Myxoma viruses? Rabbit population deteriorate, or there is a very high mortality rate in the rabbit population after the first exposure to the virus. But once they have exposed, because they were very the huge death rate is because of the their very short generation time. Rabbits have very short generation time, and the Myxoma virus then got opportunity to transfer to the their offsprings as well. But after the selection of the nature, viruses compelled to attenuate themselves, and on the other hand, rabbits become resistant. The enormously high death rate caused by the viral infection, coupled with short generation time of the rabbits, this what I just have told you, and rapidly led to the selection of the rabbits that exhibited increased resistance to the disease caused by the virus. Now just keep one thing in your mind, that a host parasite relationship or pathogen host relationship is never ever static relationship. Okay, both species evolves in response to each other's change, right? Here the first coevolution step was that rabbits become with passage of time, rabbits become resistant to the Myxoma virus, and on the other hand, Myxoma virus attenuated its virulence, right? This was the first step of the coevolution. Both parasite and the host co-evolve, but story did not end here, right? Okay, now these strains prevailed because they persisted more successfully in the rabbit population. These strains means that less virulent strains, the strains that cause mild disease in the rabbit, right? Mild symptoms. So mild or less virulent strains, why they got success? Because they could persist in the rabbit population for more time. Less virulent viruses remained within the host longer. Why? Because they don't allow the host to die, right? So they could remain they could remain present within the host for a longer time, and they got ample opportunity to get replicated there, and were transmitted to new rabbits more successfully than viruses that rapidly kill its host. The most or extreme virulent viruses did not get the chance to travel to the next host, because they rapidly kill its host and they did not get the chance to move to the next host. In this way their population got minimized, right? But at the same time, as I told you, that this host pathogen relationship is never ever a static relationship. Changes do occur. At certain time hosts become resistant, so, and next time the vigilance become much more of the viruses, right? So reduce vigilance. In case of viruses, the viruses of the mild strains are never ever the first priority of the virus population. Reduced, in other words, you may say reduced virulence is not always a successful option for the viruses. Viruses always wanted to become more and more vigilant, and their vigilancy depends on the or you may say depends on the replication of the viruses within the host. The more they could replicate, the more they could cause the severity in the disease, right? As rabbit resistance for the virus increases, what happened? Now there are the many different steps of coevolution. First, attack of the virus. Let's have a little recapitulation of this story, right? First, attack of the viruses, just to eradicate the rabbit population. Now the previously those rabbit Australian rabbits were not exposed to this Myxoma strain, so they got infected, and their infection level was very high, and they got about 99% population died of the infection of the Myxoma virus. In other words, you may say that of the myxomatosis. Disease is the myxomatosis. Next, with the passage of time, the virus got immunity in their body against these viruses. They become resistant to the Myxoma viruses, and at the same time, because of the coevolution, natural selection and selective pressures, what happened, that the viruses become attenuated. Now the second step of the coevolution. Now in this scenario, we are in the step where the rabbits are much more resistant and viruses are very mild. Now again, the second step, in response to the maximum resistance of the viruses, again the selection pressures occur on the you may say on the Myxoma viruses, and Myxoma viruses start their trait to become changed, and what happened, they become more vigilant, right? This is another step. So now what is the current situation of this process, of this story, of this co-evolution process? After 7 epidemics of the I'm going to read from here, okay? After 7 epidemics of the myxomatosis, now Myxoma viruses cause severe disease in less than 60% of the selected rabbits. With continuing passage of time, the virus and the rabbit population evolved such that rabbit Myxoma virus was approximately as serious for the rabbit population as smallpox was for a man. Once upon a time, there was a smallpox virus, and that was a very serious cause, very serious illness in humans. So now the Myxoma virus become vigilant again, but its vigilance is at the moderate level. It's not too mild, it's not too much infectious. It caused approximately 40% mortality in the rabbits. Initially it caused 99% mortality. Then it became less vigilant. Then now it become more vigilant, but of the grade 3 viruses are now much more flourished in the rabbit population. So this was the process of coevolution that took place between the viruses or between the pathogen and the host. The host is rabbit. Coevolution need not to promote stable existence of the species. Coevolution doesn't ever mean that it could promote the stable coexistence or the stable relationship or very good relationship between the host and the parasite because they are co-evolving. No, not the case is not like this. What is happening? These co-evolution in some cases, especially if you talk about the cases like of the predator-prey coevolution or like of the pathogen-host coevolution, what happened? Both species evolve in response to each other. Every species want to become more stronger than its ecologically interactive species. So coevolution need not to promote stable coexistence of the species. It certainly need not to enhance the mutual harmony. It is not necessary case in case of the coevolution. It is not must to have the mutual harmony or mutual understanding or mutual relationship or beneficial relationship between the two species. It could have, but it's not must, right? Especially in case of the host and parasite coevolution. Okay students, this was all about the first type of the coevolution, and that was about the host parasite coevolution, and we're going to talk about the rest of the two types of coevolution in the second part of the same topic, the coevolution. Till then, take care of yourself and take care of yourselves and the people surrounding you, right? And have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.